This is Behind the Verdict. I'm John Horford with Marion Cook, and this is part 3 of our OJ series. So if you haven't listened to the first 2 parts, I would go back and listen to those. Let's jump right into it, Myrene. We wanted to focus on details of the police investigation and details related to what was dubbed the trial of the century. And hopefully some of these details and missteps, not hopefully, but these details and missteps sort of explain why the case turned out the way that it did. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yeah, no, that's correct. And I think we start by going all the way back to June 12th, 1994. Nicole had a dog, ironically named Cato. The kids named it after their friend, Cato Camelin. But it was a white Akita, and some people were out walking very, very late at night and heard the dog just barking incessantly. And it ran down the path of Nicole's condo sidewalk out onto the sidewalk of the main street area to these people. And they noticed that this white Akita had blood all over its paws. And so they followed it back to Nicole's sidewalk. And when they opened the gate that would basically attach to the sidewalk, the public sidewalk, blood had just poured from Nicole and ran down the brick or cobblestone sidewalk. The entire path was bloody. And that's what notified police of this really brutal murder.
So from there, and I'm amazed that it has not come up, because I feel like this is either the first or the second most famous thing related to this trial. It's glove and white Bronco. I don't know what order it's in, but we have not talked about the Bronco chase.
Yeah.
It,
Well, before we even get to the glove and the Bronco, so there was a witness by the name of Jill Shively who was out driving that night, and she was coming to, I think it was a stop sign or a stoplight, I can't recall which, at an intersection on Bundy, where Nicole's condo was. And she said that she saw a very large man who was African American driving a white Bronco coming from the direction of Nicole's condo, driving erratically, like going up over the curb, and he pulled out in front of her. And when he got close enough to her, she said she could tell that it was O.J. Simpson. And I think Jill Shively is the witness who caught him leaving Nicole's house after the murder.
so why didn't you testify?
Well, that's a good question. I'd love to know Marcia Clark's real answer to that. But as the case was pending, all of the witnesses were being bombarded by the media, as you can imagine. And in this case, Jill Shively was a young single parent working I think a waitressing job, trying to make ends meet. And one of the news magazines, whether it was the National Enquirer or something like that, offered her $5,000 for her story. And they told her that everybody was doing it. All the witnesses were cashing in, and she should cash in so she could have some money. She didn't realize that that was something she shouldn't do. She had no idea that it would affect her ability to testify. And so my understanding from reading several articles and hearing even the co-prosecutor on the case, Chris Darden, talk about it, Chris Darden said Marcia Clark made the decision not to put Jill Shively on the stand because the defense could cross-examine her and go after the fact that maybe she made it up for money.
Gotcha. Because she had been paid.
Right.
Yeah. Ooh, that's tough. So you think that's the reason ultimately? Is that?
I think that you mean that she didn't testify?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely the reason, because she was willing to do so.
Okay. Yeah.
But in the latest documentary that I saw, they went and spoke to her again, and she said she was absolutely 100% positive it was O.J. Simpson driving the white Bronco crazily from Nicole's house and going towards his estate at Rockingham, which really was only minutes away. The detectives drove that from Nicole's to OJ's house, and it was maybe 7 minutes or so, 8 minutes. It wasn't a very long drive between the two.
Yeah. So okay. So it's pretty hard to. I mean, OJ's OJ. He's very
Yeah.
famous. He has a distinctive look. We know that he has a white Ford Bronco
Yeah.
because of the infamous chase.
Yeah.
But had she not taken the money, maybe, she's.
Well, you know what? I would have, as a prosecutor, I still would have put her on, and I would have asked her that on direct exam and say, you know what? This is what happened. Did you accept money for your story? Yes. Why? And let her explain it to the jurors in her own words. The defense is going to spin it how they want to spin it, but I've often found if I can put something on that could be a roadblock or a hiccup to my case before the defense gets to it, it takes a lot of wind out of their sails. They can't spin it any way they want because I've already let the witness explain it.
Yeah.
And yeah, they still would have cross-examined her, but I think she was a critical witness that puts OJ pretty much at the scene around the time of the murders. And I think maybe she might have made a difference.
And I guess that's us at this point. I mean, they probably assume, they're like, there's no jury that's going to look at all of this and think that OJ is innocent. Like, we're good. We don't need this witness. Like, we have this in the bag. And
that's a dangerous spot for a prosecutor to get in. I've had cases where I thought, gosh, they are going to find this person guilty in a short amount of time. And I've had cases where I'm like, well, I believe this because I've been doing it a long time, but I don't know if I'm able to convince the jury. And juries surprise me. I've had cases recently where I had something on video of what happened, and then the jury came back not guilty because of a variety of different reasons. So you never want to go into it as a prosecutor thinking it's in the bag because it never is. And the minute you get cocky as a prosecutor is the minute you're going to lose your edge.
Do you think that they were cocky?
I think they thought they had enough. I think they thought they had so much evidence that there's not a chance in hell a jury's going to come back and find him not guilty.
But honestly, put yourself in their position. I mean, you've said it numerous times in the previous episode. They had an overwhelming amount of evidence that points at OJ.
But as the prosecutor, you who's handling that case, you have to go in and keep hammering and put every nail in that coffin for the defendant that you can. You can't take that for granted thinking the jury is going to buy it. You pile it all on. If you have more, you pile it all on, because then if you have one person who has reasonable doubt, the rest of the jurors who are sane and listening to the evidence can say, no, but this and this and this and this, and just eradicate any amount of reasonable doubt they have. But, in this case, there was a lot of evidence found at the scene on Bundy where Nicole and Ron's bodies were found. They found a lot of blood from Nicole and Ron, but they also found blood drops from Nicole's body walking down the back path to the back gate, and it would have been blood that was dropping from the person's left hand. Now, who do you think had cuts on his left hand that might have possibly been over there on Bundy that night? Any names come to mind?
Whatever the name of that drug dealer that allegedly did this was.
No, O.J. Simpson had cuts on his left hand.
And how it would have can all of these things be so clear and people still come to the conclusion that he's not guilty? I don't like the cuts, the bloody shoe print that's the same size as OJ's shoe. I don't get it.
So, I'm glad you brought up the shoe, because it was a bloody shoe print found at the Bundy scene, And they were not only the same size that OJ wore, which was, I want to say like a size 13. It's a big foot, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody has a size 13 shoe.
Yep.
But they were specifically, they typed the shoe, and it was a very, very expensive shoe called Bruno Magli. And OJ was said to have commented he would never be caught dead in those ugly ass shoes because they were kind of like a black loafer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Never be caught dead in it. And you know what they found photos of?
Him in those shoes.
Him in those shoes commentating on a football game.
Oh.
He was down on the field and he was interviewing somebody, a player or a coach or somebody.
Was this
And
before or after?
that was before,
Okay.
before the murders.
Okay.
And he had those ugly ass shoes on.
Were they ugly ass shoes?
They really were, but that's not the point.
They really
The
were.
point is, he was wearing them when he said he wouldn't, and he was
Yeah.
wearing them when he murdered Ron and Nicole.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the glove earlier, and they found one bloody black leather glove near the fence, kind of near where Ron's body was at the Bundy address at Nicole's house. And then later, when they went to Rockingham, which was OJ's house, OJ had a couple guest houses in the back of his mansion, and one of them had Kato Kalin staying in it. Kalin testified that he heard a couple thuds on the back wall of his bungalow, and that would have been from the area where, oh gosh, OJ parked his Bronco haphazardly on the road and went behind the bungalows to come up from the other side of the house. He couldn't go in the front gate because the limo driver was waiting to pick him up to take him to the airport. But Kato Kalin very clearly heard thuds. He said it actually knocked a picture off the wall. So it had to be someone who, gosh, is a big person, like a football player, running into a wall. And there was a bloody glove dropped back there in the dark. Now, can you imagine the bloody glove at Bundy and the bloody glove at Rockingham? One is a left-hand glove, one is a right-hand glove, and they match.
And one was at one was at Nicole's house where she was murdered. One was at OJ's house. I mean,
Right.
Okay. Just to circle back to what we had talked about a few minutes ago with the prosecution. Of course, they thought they had enough. This is crazy.
It is crazy, but once I tell you all the good news about it all, I'm going to tell you what the defense was poking holes in.
I know. I can't.
So not only did they find the bloody gloves, and the bloody gloves had mixtures of, can you guess?
Did they actually? So they did test them.
They did. It had mixtures of Nicole's blood and Ron's blood and a third person's blood. Do you know who the third person was?
Either the drug dealer or OJ Simpson.
It's not the drug dealer, it's OJ Simpson. So not only did they have matching blood from 3 of them on the gloves, they also had blood on the outside of the Bronco that in some combination matched Nicole, Ron, and OJ. But there were also blood smears on the inside of OJ's Bronco.
It's
And that also matched
it's
a
comical.
combination of Nicole, Ron, and OJ.
It's comical, not the
It is.
situation, just the overwhelming
found
amount of evidence.
Bloody socks in OJ's bedroom that were stripped off, presumably after he, pulled off all the bloody clothes to put on clothes he could go to the airport in, picked up the rest of the clothes, but missed the socks on the ground. And they found blood on the socks matching, I believe it was OJ and Nicole on the socks.
And then speaking of him going to the airport, and did he allegedly throw something away at the airport?
Yeah, so before he leaves the house, the limo driver says when OJ finally comes out, he is out of breath. OJ tells the limo driver that he fell asleep and he took a quick shower and he's sorry he's running late, but they're like maybe 45 minutes running behind now. And he has this sets of like Louis Vuitton, very fancy luggage, very expensive luggage. But next to all of that, there is a black canvas gym style bag that didn't match the other luggage, was very cheap looking in comparison. And when Alan, the limo driver, went to put the luggage in the trunk of the limo, OJ wouldn't let him touch the bag, and only OJ grabbed the bag and put it in the back with himself.
Mm.
So when they get to the airport, the limo driver gets out and he's getting out the Louis Vuitton luggage. And OJ then takes this black canvas bag. And there is a witness at the airport who made a report back in the day that he knew it was OJ. He saw it was OJ. He was kind of watching not far away. He saw the very expensive luggage. And then he saw this black canvas bag that he felt didn't really belong with the rest of it. And he saw OJ take that and throw something into the garbage before he went into the airport. Now, my guess is he threw away the bloody knife and probably the rest of his bloody clothes because they never found the knife and they never found any other clothes of OJ's.
Mm. Why would he not just keep the gloves and put them in the bag too? Why would he take the gloves off and leave them, one at the scene and then one at his house? I mean, I guess you're not thinking straight when you do something that insane, but
Well, I think at Nicole's, when he's fighting with Ron, I think the glove may have come off then and he didn't realize it. He's in a flurry of stabbing this man and killing him. And then he's in such a furor when he goes over and stabs Nicole and literally pulls her by her head backwards and slices her neck. He's not thinking about the glove anymore. He's
mm,
thinking about how angry he is. And then he's thinking about getting out of there. So then when he gets to his house on Rockingham, he can't pull in his gated driveway because the limo driver's sitting there. So he has to park on the street, run around the back, and he probably dropped it and didn't even realize it.
it's a big thing to not realize. But I mean,
It is, but he just murdered two people, so he might not be thinking the clearest at that moment in time.
for sure.
But you also brought up the infamous slow speed Bronco chase. Have you ever heard of a slow speed police chase? I mean, really?
It's the most famous police chase of all time.
Did you ever watch that on the news? Did you ever see it?
I just clips. I haven't watched the whole thing. I know that it was like, wasn't it so watched? Like, so many people watched it that like Domino's had like a record day for like orders or something crazy like that.
Yeah, so here's the weird thing. They were in a white Bronco, but it wasn't OJ's white Bronco. It was AC Cowlings who had a matching white Bronco. That must have been the thing for retired football players.
Yeah.
But he had OJ sitting in the back seat. AC was driving, and the police were looking for OJ because he was supposed to have turned himself into police that morning. They charged him with the murders of Ron and Nicole, and his attorneys made a deal for him to turn himself in at like 11 o'clock in the morning. He never showed up, and they couldn't find him, and then he took off.
Mm.
And eventually they were able to find out that he was with AC in the car, and the police, I think, no, actually, I think AC actually called the police and said, "You guys need to back off. OJ's sitting in my back seat and he's got a gun to his head." And it's at this point in time, you've got the news helicopters and the police helicopters circling the freeways in LA until they find this white Bronco. And literally, they blocked off this, I don't know, 6, 7 lane, maybe highway, very fast, very big highway in California. And you see the white Bronco slowly driving and a plethora of law enforcement and cars behind it. And as this chase is going on, you start to see people forming on the sides of the road and at overpasses and yelling, "Go, OJ, go," which I just can't fathom why, other than his celebrity status, people were doing that. But he claimed he just wanted to go. He wanted to go see Nicole at her grave, but he didn't go there. So then he wanted to go back to Rockingham to see his mother. But I think maybe he not only had a gun in the car, but he had a bag of stuff and money and a passport. So one of the things as a prosecutor, the law tells us is that flight is a consciousness of guilt. And I think that's what happened. I think he was feeling guilty and he was going to flee. That's what I think.
It, yeah, I mean, his friend driving him, money, passport. It that seems very plausible. Very plausible.
You know, something I want to point out at Nicole's funeral, OJ leans over her body in the coffin and he's overheard repeating over and over again, "I'm so sorry, Nick." Now, one might think he's sorry that their lives didn't work out better. Or
Or
someone
sorry that
might
she died.
maybe,
Sorry that this happened to her. Sorry that that drug dealer was so violent.
or actually, "I'm sorry I did this to you, Nick." I think that's what it was for.
Yeah. It could have
But
been.
so there's a lot of evidence, right? We've got eyewitnesses who've seen him there. We've got eyewitnesses who have come forward and, said things and what they saw and bruises and him actually abusing Nicole. We've got all this blood, right? And the combination of Nicole's and Ron's and OJ's. And you would think that with all of that, the jury would find him guilty. But as we know, unfortunately, this case didn't go the right way. And what the defense really focused on are the missteps by the police.
So
So there were several that they did. There was some improper packaging of evidence where I think it was Dennis Fung was the lead forensic evidence tech on scene. And he said, "I always follow protocol and I always wear gloves and all the things." And they went back over all of the TV video and found one scene where he wasn't necessarily picking up anything, but he was with the people handling evidence and he didn't have gloves on.
hmm.
So now the defense is going to point out, well, that's tainted. They tried to argue that the blood draw from OJ that was taken by police wasn't put into evidence right away. And they took it from the Bundy scene to the Rockingham scene, and police somehow.
Is that true?
They did have it with them, but it was secured in the vehicle, which they should have taken it to the station.
Why wouldn't they?
Because they were going from one scene to the other trying to figure all this out. But here's the issue. To believe that misstep by the police, that they were framing him, you have to believe they wanted to go after OJ. And again, we've said this time and time again, at the time, OJ was a beloved celebrity. He was beloved in the area. He had no issues other than, being an abusive asshole. But the public didn't necessarily know all of that.
Yeah.
So his team focused on that.
And this same police department had just killed Rodney King. Not too long before this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they beat Rodney King. He didn't die.
Oh, yeah. I think he's still alive, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Rodney.
But they also they made it seem like this detective, Mark Furman, was one of the lead investigators, and he wasn't. He was one of the first people on scene, but the case was actually assigned to two detectives, Van Adder and Lang. But in that infamous photo where we see somebody pointing to a bloody glove on the ground,
it's Furman.
That was Furman.
Yeah.
And so what they tried to do is just eviscerate him by bringing up some things that he had said. I don't know how many years before this, but a great number of years before this case.
He used
about
that
how he
N-word
used
a little liberally.
Lot of racial slurs and other things.
Yeah, that's kind of I get it. I mean, that was great on the defense's part to utilize that, because somebody with a history of using that type of language, even if it's taken out of context for the situation, it's compelling.
Yeah, it is. Is Furman an asshole? Yeah. But I do think they took some of that out of context too, because the recordings that they used it from were from Furman talking with a author or a producer, I can't remember which, who wanted to do some sort of cop show and wanted to know how, real life detectives might respond to this circumstance or that circumstance. And so whether it was something he believed or didn't believe, I don't know that that really all should have come in the way it did,
It's
but it
also
did.
problematic that he's saying like, oh, well, this is how cops, react to these types of circumstances, and this is the type of language they use, and then that's the type of language he regurgitates. I mean, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's another huge red flag. It's like, okay, so cops have a
Yeah.
tendency to act like this and to use this language. Like maybe they
Yeah.
really are after this guy, and it's just creating doubt.
Right. So that was problematic. And then one of the biggest things that I think was a misstep, well, there's two things really. So one of them was one of the detectives grabbed a blanket from Nicole's living room to cover her body because at this point, daylight is coming and media is circling and people are focused on this path. And like I said, you can see if you look down this long path, you can see the bloody steps, you can see the bloody sidewalk, and you can see Nicole just covered in blood. Like her blonde hair was matted red with blood. And so they took a blanket from inside and covered her body with it. And there were some, I think, DNA and hairs on that matched on her, eventually that matched OJ. And what the defense said was, well, of course his DNA was there. He was over at that house. He was visiting his kids. He was doing all these things.
Yeah.
So of course that's going to be on the blanket, which then was transferred onto Nicole's body.
Yep. They did a great job of taking advantage of these holes.
They did. And then the next hole is one that absolutely positively drives me crazy. And it is the bloody glove try-on at the trial.
Are you telling me that you would not have allowed that?
Not in a fucking million years.
How do you stop that?
So what happened was F. Lee Bailey was one of the defense attorneys, and he had been working on this case, and he was cross-examining one of the witnesses. And so F. Lee Bailey started baiting Chris Darden, pushing him. Well, you've got those gloves, make OJ try them on, he was kind of pushing him to do that. Now, why would a defense attorney push them to do that unless they know it doesn't fit? How would they know it doesn't fit? A, if he didn't do it and they weren't his gloves.
Yeah.
Wrong answer. B, if you are a football player who has extreme arthritis in your hands, and if you don't take your arthritis medicine, your hands swell, that could be. Or you also know that real leather gloves drenched in blood as a liquid are going to shrink. That may be. Or if you put latex gloves on and then you try to pull on a shrunken leather glove, it's not going to fit. Do you remember the phrase that Johnny Cochran threw out about the gloves?
If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah, it was a smart phrase. I hate it, but it was.
You're like, it's damn good.
It was. It was very good, but
it's a big risk on their end though, because what if it fits perfectly? It's just like, oh god damn it, like, and the glove just fit because they were his gloves. She bought them the gloves.
They were an extra large size. They had a receipt that Nicole had purchased those gloves for him like 2 Christmases before.
Yeah, they had the receipt.
Yeah, they did actually.
Same brand, same size.
Exactly, all of it. Yeah.
I mean, come on.
But what was OJ's job other than playing football?
Acting.
So when they had him stand up there and pretend to try to put those gloves on, he could make sure they don't fit. And again, you're putting shrunken gloves over latex gloves over a man's hands who probably didn't take his arthritis medicine and his knuckles are swollen. You're never going to get it on. But if you watch those clips, you can clearly see that OJ's hamming it up, like not really trying to tug them on very much.
This trial lasted 9 months though. I mean, you don't necessarily know what day, you're going to get the prosecution to be like, all right, put the glove on. You don't necessarily know. Like, I mean, I guess you might know within like a few days or maybe a week, but so you just tell them, well, OJ, salty food, no arthritis medicine, really get those things swollen. Like,
Yeah.
it's bad for his health. Like, he just, I don't know.
Well, being convicted of murder was going to be bad for his health too, right?
I guess, but I mean, it's just 9 months is a long time. I mean,
But after they did that demonstration and it backfired, I don't know that the prosecution really tried to rebut that later. Like, I would have brought in a glove expert to say, yep, you know what? Gloves that are leather drenched in blood are going to shrink. There's number one. If the person doesn't take their meds and they have arthritis, they're going to shrink. If they eat salty foods, his hands may swell. All of those things they should have rebutted. And I don't know that they did that.
again, maybe they just thought they had an overwhelming amount of evidence. They're just like, we'll be fine.
Yeah. There was another thing I saw recently where there was a female African American juror who spoke out and said one of the things that bothered her from the very beginning was this case was going to be tried by Marcia Clark and another senior assistant prosecutor in the office. I forget this gentleman's name, but he was an older Caucasian male. And during the pretrial motion hearings, sometime during that time period, not during the hearing itself, but during that time frame, he had a heart attack or some sort of heart issue, where he had to be taken off the case because he had a medical issue going on. And so the head prosecutor, I think it was Gil Garcetti at the time, replaced him with Chris Darden. And this juror, they don't know why they switched prosecutors. They don't have to come in and say, hey, the other prosecutor had a heart attack, so we're bringing in somebody new. All the jury knew is suddenly there's an African American prosecutor, and they felt, at least this one juror felt, that that was on purpose to balance the race card, she said.
But it had nothing to do with that.
Had nothing to do with that
Yeah.
we know of. I mean,
and they could have also thought that it would work to their advantage, in theory.
they could have, in theory, but again, this is one of those things where people latch onto something that doesn't matter what his race was as a prosecutor, does it?
It doesn't, but obviously it does, and it did.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So
It did.
that's life. So you've mentioned before that the media spectacle wasn't controlled. How do you control the media spectacle?
Well, for one, you don't allow the cameras in the courtroom.
Can you say no?
Yeah, the judge can. The judge has the absolute power and control over that courtroom. He can say there are no cameras allowed in here, or he could limit it if he wanted to. But he clearly could have said no cameras allowed.
So what's the advantage to allowing the cameras besides you becoming more famous?
I guess it depends on whose perspective you're looking at.
Your
it worked well
perspective.
for the defense because they were able to showboat up one side, down another about all of this. I mean, I remember seeing a clip from Johnny Cochran's opening statement, and Chris Darden did the prosecution's opening statement, and Chris talked about the prior domestic violence and all of those things, and Johnny had the audacity to get up there and say, this case isn't about domestic violence. How can you say that with a straight face?
I mean, because you're trying to win, and he won.
Well, I could never be a defense attorney. I mean, could you see me as a defense attorney?
You could do it.
No, I couldn't. I'd be like, you did this. You are
guilty son of
guilty
a
as
bitch.
sin.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
you're like, it's like, you're supposed to be
I couldn't
defending.
do it. I just couldn't.
Yeah. It would be hard. It would be hard. But everybody, do you not believe that everybody deserves representation?
I do believe everyone deserves representation. I think in this case, he paid for his freedom. He paid for a team to come in and try to, show missteps by the police and capitalize on things that should have been done differently. I think he bought his freedom in this case, and that's what bothers me.
Yeah. But as you've said before in the past, I mean, it's an unfortunate reality that not just in this case, but in lots of cases, I mean, your freedom can be bought by getting the right people to defend you.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is about a year after this verdict, there was a civil case that the Goldman family instituted against OJ for the wrongful deaths of Nicole and Ron. And in that case, the judge learned the lesson that Judge Ito in the criminal case didn't. The civil judge did not allow the media in. And you know what that jury found?
Guilty.
That OJ was liable for their deaths based
Mm.
on the same evidence that was presented in the
So
criminal
not
case.
guilty. So not
He,
guilty, but liable.
well, it's a different standard.
Yeah.
He was found liable for their deaths, and he was ordered to pay like $33.5 million to the Goldman and Brown families.
Did he actually pay that?
He hid his assets the best he could. He paid very, very small amounts. It wasn't much of anything. He pretended he didn't have any money
Yeah.
and, hid everything he could.
So that's why the Goldman family got control of the royalties from OJ's book, the If I Did It, which is just
Yeah.
crazy that
Yeah, they
he
did.
put a book out like that.
So I think I mentioned this on our first episode, but I wanted to read the book because he co-authored this, and I knew there was a chapter in it where it talked about how the murders could have went down had he done it.
Oh my God.
But I didn't buy the book until the Goldmans got control of the royalties. And I love that they changed the title. It was If I Did It in big letters, all words were big letters when OJ had control. When the Goldmans got it, they put the bloody shoe print from the Bruno Magli shoes sort of like superimposed under the words, If I Did It, and the word if is in very small print. So if you look at that title now, it says, I did it.
Yeah. Which, yeah.
And, that book was really interesting because it was poor him. He's a great guy, blah, blah, blah. But then he gets to the chapter where he talks about, if I did it, this is what could have happened. And he talked about being in this so angry with her. He was in this fugue state, didn't really know what was going on, claimed somebody else might have been with him. And this is how he would have stabbed both of them and how it all came to be. I think that was a confession that, we'll never get because now OJ's gone
Yeah.
and we won't know for sure if that's what happened or not.
Just the fact that he wrote that book and had a chapter, if I did do it, this is how I would have done it. Like, what could possess a human to do that? Like, what is wrong with you?
I think there were a lot more people who should have come forward in this trial of the century, friends of theirs, but they didn't. And I think they were afraid to, make OJ mad at them. I think they were afraid to go against the friendship. But there was one I just want to give sort of like props to. So a friend of theirs, I think his name is Ship. He was a police officer at the time, but he was a friend of OJ's, a friend of Nicole's. And every time OJ would beat the tar out of her, she would talk to this friend. I think his name was Ron Ship. And she would say, Ron, this is what he did to me. And he would see the marks and he would see the bruises. And he was there one night when OJ actually hit or threw Nicole. I can't remember what it was. He was one of the only brave friends of OJ's who got up on that stand and testified that OJ was abusive to Nicole. And do you know what they did to that guy, the defense?
Tore him up over his own past.
Tore him up over his own past about whether he had an alcohol issue years prior, even though he'd been sober for years, or whether he was getting back at OJ because he wanted to be with Nicole and he wasn't good enough for Nicole. I mean, they tore this man up, and all he was trying to do was say the right thing. They even asked him on the stand, how do you feel about being here testifying against your friend? And he said, well, I don't know if he's still my friend. He said, I'll always love OJ, but I have to stand up for Nicole, and what he did to her and Ron was wrong.
If he was up against anyone but the dream team,
Right.
that might have gotten through. But like you've said numerous times, I mean, they were so effective at just tearing the prosecution's case apart.
Yeah. It's very sad because at the end of the day, yes, I understand he deserves his representation. And yes, this team did a very good job. They were good at being defense attorneys. But at the end of the day, we still had two people brutally murdered. And I think the spectacle of this trial, lost sight of that, lost sight of Nicole and lost sight of Ron. I think they needed to be remembered and thought about in this whole thing. And I think that just is the saddest thing.
Mm. I agree that that is the saddest thing, and it's terrible that their families never genuinely got justice for what happened. I guess getting the royalties and some money helps to a degree, but OJ was never genuinely punished in the way that an individual who committed these types of heinous murders should be punished.
No, he wasn't. I guess a little bit of retribution. Years later, he got convicted of armed robbery. He robbed people who were trying to sell some of his own memorabilia,
Yep, in
and he
Vegas.
robbed them and had a gun. And
Yeah.
he got convicted of that and got like his sentence was 30 years initially. And I think he served, I don't know, like 8, 10, 12, maybe.
That's
He didn't
so
serve all of it
that's
or
still a
even
long
most of it.
time.
Yeah, but it wasn't long enough. He should have died.
Well, for you, yeah,
He should have.
yeah.
But that's not just me. I mean, if
I
anybody
I
truly
know.
believes he did it, where do you think he should be? Or
Oh,
he
if he
should.
did it, but he didn't go to jail because of that. This is
No,
because
he
something.
didn't.
Yeah, and that's what I was basing it on. Yeah.
But he still, armed robbery could be a life offense. So he should have done his whole 30 years. He shouldn't have been paroled.
Mm, yeah. Ugh. OJ. Get it together, man. It's,
I had hoped maybe somewhere he would have left a letter or a statement, something. But I think,
he wrote a
quite
chapter in a
honestly,
book.
I know, but I mean, I thought maybe more than that. But I really think that OJ's ego was bigger than life itself. And he didn't want anybody else thinking less of him. He wanted to go to his grave saying, I didn't do this. That was one of the things he said during the civil trial is, I want to try to find who did this. I'm going to help find that person and I want to look them in the eye. And I remember, I think it was Ron Goldman's dad said, well, all he had to do was look in the mirror because that's who did this.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to highlight before we wrap up the OJ Simpson case?
Other than Ron and Nicole, obviously their families, but I think it was most sad for Sydney and Justin, the two little kids, because there was a custody battle between the Brown family and OJ for a long time, and the kids lived with the Browns throughout the pendency of all these trials. But when he was acquitted, uh, he got custody back. And I can't imagine like being those kids growing up with that man going, did you murder our mom? Did you not murder our mom? I can't imagine what that would have been like for them.
I can't remember exactly, and I should have looked this up. But I had heard that he had good relationships with his kids. Is that true?
He did for the most part. He had moved to Florida with them at some point. And there was at least one 911 call his daughter Sydney made to police because he was being abusive.
Mm. So
So,
he hadn't fully changed. I mean,
no,
yeah.
I don't think he fully changed. And the kids have really tried to stay out of the media and the spotlight. They've never really come out to say we supported our dad or we believed he did it one way or the other.
I don't blame
Nicole's
him.
family certainly has, her
Yeah.
sisters and all of that. And the Goldman family certainly has. But, we never heard those things from Justin and Sydney.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all. I mean, that's a difficult situation, especially when you have a relationship with your dad. And it's unfortunate, and humans are so complex sometimes that someone who could be such a monster and commit such a horrible, horrible crime could also, in theory, be a good dad to them.
He could be.
Like, it's just, yeah, I mean, life is complex in these strange ways. So I don't blame the kids for not coming forward.
No, I don't either. I think it would have been too hard for them. Even if they truly did believe he did something, I can't believe that that's the case. A lot of people have speculated over the years that maybe they heard something, but there's no proof of that at all.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. If you have any questions about this case or suggestions for other cases, please reach out to us anytime on TikTok or on Instagram. The handle is BTV_pod.
And we'd love to know your verdict on this case. Was OJ guilty or not guilty?
We're still waiting for someone to fight Myrene on this, and I'm dying to see this.
Well, you could fight me on that, John. We could spar.
No, I don't want to fight you, Myrene. You're too scary.
Oh, come on. Look at my smile. I'm very nice.
You can be. You can be, but you're fierce too. So
I am very passionate about cases, and this is one where I have absolutely no doubts he did it.
Completely understand. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.